It looked for a long time like the ACC was in peril. Did it not? They looked like they were in peril to me. And then that was kind of confirmed because what did we have? We had member institutions in the ACC, namely Florida State and Clemson, pursuing legal options to try and get out of the conference. So don't tell me there was nothing going on when there was clearly something going on. Well, lately, the tone has shifted. So since you and I last spoke, we had several bits of breaking news the other day. It's just a bunch of people being told, okay, you can run with it now. And they all have the same story and they run with it. But they have settled any active litigation with the ACC, Florida State, Clemson. So they're not suing their own conference anymore. They're not trying to get out anymore, at least for the time being. I'm winking if you're listening on podcast, and we appreciate you if you do. Make sure you subscribe. And the reason that this kind of de-escalated was because it went down the only path it could go down. So the ACC is saying, this looks terrible. Our own kids want to sue us and leave. And the kids are like, yeah, we're not being fed enough. We're starving. We go to school every day, and our friends have syrup mustaches all over the corners of their mouth. They smell like school breakfast. But hey, at least they're being fed. We got nothing. We're so emaciated. We look terrible. And then the conference said, okay, if you'll just stop threatening to leave home, we'll give you a little bit more food than the rest of your siblings get. That's basically where we're at right now. It's just a continuance. It's just deferring, kicking cans down the road. But what we've got here, if you haven't been paying attention, and judging by the traffic these articles have gotten, you haven't been. It matters, though. That's why I'm talking about it on the show. There are brand initiatives baked into this sort of new deal in the ACC. And there are what are called success factors baked in as well. A bunch of legal nonsense that essentially means if people watch your games a whole lot, you're going to make more money. And if you win more, you're going to make more money. So we're headed towards a little bit more of a meritocracy-based system, which sounds great. But also, here is where the rubber meets the road. Yes, if you're Florida State and you're more popular and you get higher viewership, you're going to make more money here. Ditto for Clemson or Florida State or Miami or whoever, or whomstever. But the important part here is the exit fee, the money you'd have to pay to leave the conference, drops every year, and it settles at $75 million to leave the conference in 2031. Remember that date. Remember that year. It's going to be talked about for the next half decade. 2031, which seems like it's a long way away now, but you remember Joe Burrow at LSU? You remember Ed Orgeron, that magical season at LSU? That was as far in the rearview mirror as 2031 is in the windshield. It's not that far away, although I'm not in any hurry to get there, but it's not that far away. That's when everything goes kaboom. That's when everything could go kaboom. And in the ACC terms, that is when everyone could hit the exit door affordably. Again, relatively speaking, this is management money we're talking about. To you and I, $75 million, that's a pretty hefty chunk of change. But these are management types, okay, so they can afford it. What really happened here? Okay, so here's what happened. Not much changed, really. It seems like a ton changed, but not much changed. Hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. The big boys in the ACC still know long-term we're not going to be able to match with Alabama or Ohio State or Southern Cal or Georgia because we're not going to make as much money as them. Now, in the short term, Florida State and Clemson or Miami or North Carolina, whoever's good and popular, got to be both, can't just be one. Whoever fits that description in the short term stands to make enough to where they can at least be in the ballpark. I'm going to dumb it down because these are not exact numbers, but if Tennessee is making, let's just say, $75 million a year for being in the SEC, if Michigan, let's just say, is making $75 million for being in the Big Ten, and Florida State, because they're a winner and because they're popular, can make $61 million in a year, it's not matching exactly, but it's close enough. At that point, you're at least competitive. What you can't do is be making half of what they make every year and still be expected to compete with them. That's what you can't do, okay? So in the short term, Yes, as long as you take care of your business and you're popular, so you're an established brand, so you got the high TV ratings and you got the good win-loss record, you're making the playoff and whatnot, you can make enough money to sustain yourself. But you still want to leave. Long term, you still want to leave. I mean, think about that. In that very, very simplified scenario, even the best case still has you lagging behind what they just get for existing. Like Kentucky gets more money for waking up tomorrow morning than you'd get if you had the highest viewership in your conference and you won a couple of playoff games. So that's still not acceptable long term. I mean, Florida State looks in the mirror and says, there is no way Vanderbilt should be making more than me in the world of college football. And you can understand why they'd feel that way. So you got it just kind of being deferred down the road until 2031. In 2031, why is that so important? Well, I just told you from an ACC standpoint why it's important, because it costs the least it would ever cost to get out of the conference in 2031. Remember those numbers being thrown around, Jesse and Colin? People thought it would take like 300 million, 400 million if they tried to break the grant of rights this past year. Well, 75 by comparison is chump change. So 2031 is important because they can get out at that point for still a pretty high price tag, but an affordable price tag. But why 2031? Well, it's not just a random year. That's why. It's the year the Big 12 media rights deal is up. It's the year the Big 10 media rights deal is up, thereabouts. It's the year the March Madness TV rights deal is up. And it's the year the college football playoff rights deal is up. The SEC, a couple of years after that, has their deal up with ESPN. The thinking is it's basically a waterfall moment for television, for college athletics, for media rights in general. And you also have to understand, hit fast forward another 5 years on Netflix. Hit fast forward another 5 years on any of a number of streaming platforms. Are they fully in the live event space and the live sporting space to the point where they're buying media rights deals in package form instead of one-off events? My guess is yes, they are. So there'll be a ton of money available at that point. And it's kind of a waterfall moment in the sense that if you've ever, been canoeing down a river, hopefully you've never experienced this. I doubt many of you have experienced this, but just paint the picture in your mind. Let's go theater of the imagination for a second. If you're canoeing down the river, just ho-hum, and then you see the waterfall up ahead, and you can't get to the side, what do you know? You know you're in trouble, but you don't know how much trouble, because you don't know how steep the waterfall is. You don't know how far the drop will be. You don't really know anything about what's beyond the waterfall. You just know where it is. Okay, that's the one saving grace. You're not blindfolded. You don't have to guess when the drop's coming. 2031, right there. That's where the edge of the waterfall is. But beyond that, am I going to survive it, period? If I'm Wake Forest, I'd wonder that. If I'm Clemson, I don't wonder if I'm going to survive. I wonder where in the world I'm going to land. How healthy am I when I land? Do I land in the Big Ten? Do I land in the waters of the SEC? Do those brands even mean the same thing in 2031 that they mean now? So the potential issue, that's bookmark that, okay? Turn the page with me for a second. Just bookmark that point. It sounds good for the time being if you're a major established brand in the ACC, right? We keep mentioning the same ones. If I'm a Florida State fan, I'm not thrilled, but I'm okay, because I know if I take care of business on my end, people will watch my games, and I'll make extra money because I win, and I'm not just trailing behind Florida to the point where I can't keep up just because they happen to have a different conference's sticker on their helmet than me. So I'm okay with it. Not great, but I'm okay with it. But that's only if the status quo remains the same. So I always tell you, humbly but forcefully, you're not wasting your time watching this show. A lot of you have observed that there are things we say on the show, there's some themes, some areas, some roads we go down, and then you start hearing it elsewhere. That's a compliment. We're not always first on stuff. We don't even fancy ourselves a breaking news show or anything like that, but we talk to people constantly. Sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a conference commissioner, sometimes it's an executive at a major network, but we're really informed, or try to be, on stuff like this. So there's this theme that I've noticed a lot of people bouncing around this week, because there is a potential flaw. There is a potential fly in the ointment here for Florida State and Clemson. Sure, if everyone keeps making what they're making, and you can get close to what they're making, then that's wonderful. And a lot of the advantage they had over you has been erased. But if I take you back to January, on this very show, we saw this coming, and I painted one of the first potential downside scenarios that could rear its ugly head for the big boys in the ACC. Roll it, Colin. Does anyone really think that the bigger brands in the ACC are going to be willing to pull this off to where they disproportionately benefit through brand initiatives and success initiatives, and Georgia's not going to look at that and then look at their league office and say, why don't we have this? You really don't think Ohio State and Michigan look at this and don't look at their league office and say, hold up a second, why don't we earn more than Purdue? They will, and they are. I just don't think it's being written about yet. But common sense tells me that's coming. I've always been uneasy about this. Jamie Pollard's the AD up at Iowa State. He said this a while back. He was dead on the money. And he was kind of tongue-in-cheek talking about how there are people at second and third tier schools in the SEC that just pound their chest and blindly yell SEC. And he was like, who says you'll always be in the SEC? So now that we've gotten a little further down the road, I'll tell you this. I wasn't just running my mouth to hear my mouth run. I've been accused of doing such things, but I wasn't that night. I was telling you that because I was hearing even then that was already happening. I don't think that's been reported anywhere. I don't think anyone has broken that story, and I'm not the one who will break it. I'm just telling you point blank, conversations along those lines have already happened. So it's not theoretical. Florida State, Clemson, a lot of the big boys in the ACC, they found a way to tilt their conference's media rights deal in their favor. Thus far, that doesn't exist. In the Big Ten, you kind of earn what you earn. In the SEC, you kind of earn what you earn. And the thinking is, everyone's earning so much, let's pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered, let's not complain. But when the Alabamas or the Ohio States of the world look at Clemson and Florida State being able to pull that off in the ACC, human nature is to look around for Ohio State and say, why in the world should Northwestern earn what we earn? Human nature is for the University of Texas to look around and ask, why in the world would Vanderbilt earn what we earn? And once there's precedent in the room, they can ask that question and then follow it up, and they can say, look at the ACC. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, they are. They've already practiced that. So, hey, if you're Florida State and you can pull to within $15 million a year with Florida, that's great. But if Florida reworks the whole mechanism in the SEC where they pull further ahead, well, then you're kind of back to where you were already. This doesn't really even concern a lot of us because we don't make that money anyway. 2031 does concern me, though. Maybe in a bad way, maybe in a good way. That's the nature of the waterfall. We don't know what comes after it. I will say this, and this is where we'll leave that bookmark because we've got a long time to 2031. Many of you are unhappy with the state of college football right now. Many of you, I'm one of them, do not like that regionality and territoriality has been totally evaporated. The concept of what a conference used to be has totally eroded away. And you've got the era of the super conference and the era of nationalizing conferences in flavor. USC and Rutgers play in the same conference, for example. I do believe we're headed towards a world where we have a Big Two officially. We already have it unofficially. The SEC and the Big Ten lap everyone already unofficially. But officially, maybe down the road, we get to where even in 2020, when we first started doing this show, I told you we were headed, which is sort of an AFC, NFC version of college football. Just the AFC's role is played by the Big Ten, and the NFC's role is played by the SEC. That sucks. You hate it. I know you do. There is one little ray of sunshine that I want to present you, and that is there's a way everything's made whole again. You know, there's a world, it's well down the road, so I just want to plant this seed now. there's a world down the road where if you think about college football programs or college athletic departments, I mean, they all still exist. It's not like Stanford disappeared. They're just in a new conference. It's not like Arizona and Arizona State disappeared. They just happen to play in a new conference. Well, what if down the road, all of that kind of gets collectively swallowed up by two major brands, and then someone who has a little common sense about themselves or a little bit of appreciation about the history of college football and what makes sense for college football is in charge by that point, and they look around and they say, well, we have all of the assets that used to make up the Pac-12. We've got 24 teams in this conference now anyway. Why don't we divide it back up? What I'm basically suggesting is, what if we get to a world where the SEC and the Big Ten gobble up all the major programs and all the major teams, but then they look and they say, we got way too much inventory here. We've got to divide this up. What you would call divisions in the pro game, we would call conferences in college football. What if the Pac-10 just comes right on back? What if the ACC just comes right on back? Or what if versions of those conferences just come right on back? They're under different ownership, but we don't care about that. It doesn't really concern us. What concerns me is I want to see regionality matter again. And maybe, just maybe, way down the road, we find out that because college sports got thrown in such a blender, the only way to get it back to where we wanted it to be, aesthetically at least, was for a lot of consolidation to happen. There's no guarantee we go that route. You know me, I'm very optimistic, and so that's the way I want it to go. So why not use the microphone to speak it into existence?